Okay, we'll call the City of Saratoga Springs City Council work session to order. First on the agenda tonight is Code Amendment Section 1905.16, accessory dwelling units.
All right, Mayor and Council, this is a code amendment it's a work session tonight. The Planning Commission has not yet had a hearing or made a recommendation. They are discussing it currently, along with quite a few other code amendments, so we're not exactly sure how soon it's coming to you. However, it does involve accessory dwelling units in the city, and so prior to moving forward into the public process, staff wanted to bring this to the council for some just initial discussion over the concept and potential program that has been tentatively outlined. So first of all, just to make sure everyone's on the same page as to what an accessory dwelling unit is. What it is a dwelling unit within a single family home. So whether it's a basement apartment, a detached dwelling, something over a garage, they are meant to be secondary to and incidental to the use of the property as a single family dwelling. So with that, the draft program outlined some of the background of this have been that the city has received numerous inquiries about whether or not they can put an accessory dwelling unit into their house. Staff has also been working with code enforcement to enforce on the illegal apartments that are located in the city currently. We actually had some staffers that were trying to move into the city, and as they were hunting for units would find basement apartments and say, technically I should report this, huh? A little bit awkward for them. But yes, right now the city does not allow basement apartments or accessory dwelling units in any shape or form. You can add a second kitchen to your basement if you want, or a second kitchen to your house, but you can't separate it off, and you have to sign an agreement saying that you're not going to use it as an apartment. Now that being said, there are quite a few in the city, and staff regularly gets inquiries either over the phone or at the counter about, hey, I'm moving into the city, can we put in an apartment? Whether it's for family or not, we get both kinds of questions. So some of the, staff has done a lot of research on this. A lot of cities do allow them. Some of the benefits, as outlined in your memo, include, counterintuitively, I know there are some concerns about neighborhood stability. You see it actually as both a benefit and a concern on this chart here, or on the list here. So what it does in terms of neighborhood stability, it allows for older residents to remain in a larger home, for example, or people that lose their job or have an illness. It adds additional income to help cover the cost of their mortgage. So it actually can increase neighborhood stability. Now, of course, there's also the opposite concern that you have the potential for renters to move in and out of the neighborhood, so neighborhood instability. However, that is also an option for single-family homes. We have a lot of homes in the city that are already rentals, as we've discussed several times. Multi-generational options, an additional housing option, broadening property rights, and then also helping the city to comply with moderate income housing requirements, both federal and state requirements. Basement apartments and accessory units, mother-in-law apartments, typically count as affordable housing because of the price point, and so that can help the city with compliance with those standards. Now, some of the concerns that get discussed, obviously, traffic. You have an additional car or two, depending on the size of the unit. There are concerns for over-proliferation of units. As outlined in the memo, but a majority of cities that allow these don't see a whole lot of them. For example, they're actually allowed in my neighborhood, and when I went to do some research, found out there was one right around the corner. Hadn't known it, but it was the only one in the neighborhood. It is also allowed in Eagle Mountain, but you're not seeing them pop up everywhere. Also, there's a concern about irresponsible tenants. One of the items in the proposal is to require owner occupancy of one of the units, because if an owner is living there, you typically don't see as many issues, if any. Neighborhood instability, we talked about that. There are two sides to that one. And then also something the Planning Commission discussed at length was how this, if the city chooses to allow accessory dwelling units, how that will play with CC&Rs, covenants, HOAs, etc. Now, HOAs are allowed to be more restrictive than the city, and so if an HOA or CC&Rs prohibit this, then even though the city allows it, the HOA can still deny it. Also, allowing the program would allow it in single-family development only. Single-family areas, you have more space, you have larger driveways, you have more likely the ability to absorb a few units. So the proposal includes, and again it's draft, making a minimum lot size. Right now the discussion is 8,000 square feet. That can also vary by zone. Limiting the size of an accessory dwelling unit. The draft includes a maximum of 800. It was previously discussed to be 1,200. Kind of have gone back and forth on that. The reason 1,200 was listed was that if you have a 1,200 square foot rambler with a 1,200 square foot basement, if someone wanted to put an accessory dwelling unit, they would have to block off part of the basement to make it comply. So an option there would be to have a size limit, just not on basements. That's what they did in Summit County. Was if it's a detached or an accessory building or over a garage unit, there's a square footage limitation, but if it's a basement, it's the size of the basement. So that's an option for discussion. Number of units, a house could have one, and only if they meet all these other requirements. Requiring owner occupancy, that is the biggest one. Owner occupancy really does help mitigate most of the issues. The one around the corner from my house, we never knew about it, and it was owner occupied. They only brought people in that they were comfortable having in their house. So I know some judgment, yes, included. But so the next item is design standards. It has to look like a single family home, the entrance being on the side or the rear, not looking like a side-by-side duplex, for example. Also, maximum occupancy. Proposal includes a limit of 2 adults with or without minor children. So that helps also to keep the occupancy down. You won't have, like they see in Park City, for example, you won't see 4, 5, or 6 seasonal workers cramming into a unit because that's not possible under this proposal. Parking, 1 space per bedroom. Requiring building code compliance, that's for safety. There have been lengthy discussions with the Planning Commission over this, but seems to be coming down to requiring building code compliance, including separate air and water, so that someone upstairs has the flu, they're not passing it to the basement. Also requiring a business license or a rental dwelling license. So that's something we would put in place. And if there were issues or non-compliance with these, that license could be revoked. Participation in the Good Landlord program, that's something we could do down the road. There are a couple other hoops that we would have to jump through. Requiring separate access, but again on the side and the rear, and then making sure that they are complying with CC&Rs and covenants. So that's the draft program outline. This would not be available in all locations, obviously. Anywhere where the CC&Rs or the covenants restrict it won't be possible. The HOA can always change that if they want. I don't see that very often. I've seen it happen once. And again, you're not going to see every lot in a neighborhood do this because most people, they like to use their whole house. This is just something that would be an option, an availability, and help in a lot of ways. But again, it is a political decision and something for the council to weigh in on. So we're here to get your input and thoughts on the concept in general. This is, again, going through work sessions with the Planning Commission, but not up for public hearings yet.
All right. I had a couple questions, I guess, and some comments. So I had a question about the maximum size limitation, but you kind of spoke to it with the basement. If we go down this road, I would favor, allowing the whole basement, just because it doesn't make sense to block off 400 square feet for no reason. And then R5, what are the, can you remind me of the lot sizes in R5? Pretty small.
R5 does go down to small, but what the proposal was that it's only on the larger lots. So if it's in the R5 and they have larger lots, allowing that, but not allowing it on the smaller lots. And it's either 6,000 or 7,000. I'd have to look at it.
Okay. And would it be possible to say, just like in R5, you can only do the basement, you can't have an auxiliary building?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Something I've seen elsewhere is that they only allow detached on a half acre or larger, or a quarter acre or larger, and so you can certainly put those limitations in there.
Okay. What's involved with a good landlord? Never having been a landlord, I assume there's some sort of incentive that is given to the good landlord.
Yes, I'll let Mark weigh in on this a little bit.
Yep, the Good Landlord program is, it's been around for probably, I'd say 9 years, 10 years. The idea behind the Good Landlord program is, in the state of Utah, you can only charge business license fees associated with the direct cost to administer those businesses, or the enhanced level of service or disproportionate costs that are associated with managing certain types of businesses. Typically, what the Good Landlord program does is it measures how much it costs to monitor like rental apartments and things of that nature, and then that becomes a disproportionate cost or enhanced level of service. And then typically, if someone is going to be a member of the Good Landlord program, which the Good Landlord program, they have seminars, they have training, they have legal documents, standard legal documents, rental agreements. They train people how to evict, they train people how to be good landlords. In essence, it takes someone who's never rented a property and it provides them with the tools and the experience necessary to be successful, as well as, you know, advisory opinions and things. It's kind of like the League of Cities and Towns for cities, but it's run by the Apartment Association here in Utah, and it helps them to be better landlords. And so the idea is, if they receive the training, if they stay active with you know, the Good Landlord training, then they're less likely to you know, allow their tenants to do things that disrupt the neighborhoods and things of that nature. And so if they're participating in the Good Landlord program, then they would receive a discount on their business licenses. And that's typically how it's done. And usually they'll also do background checks and other things. And so you know, what I've seen in my past experiences is as soon as property owners get trained and understand how to do background checks, how to do credit checks, how to do those things, they're less likely to get people moving in that would be you know, an adverse renter or something along those lines.
Okay. The other thing was a comment, and I don't necessarily think this deserves a change to the language, but the military service, I'll just warn you that if it's a deployment, they've got extraordinary legal protection, and so it probably should be a shall instead of a may, but then it gets really awkward. So just as at the staff level, know that you don't have a lot
It'll pretty much
leeway.
be treated as a shall, unless there's some abuse going
Right.
on.
I mean, leave the language the way it is, but
Okay,
just
perfect.
be aware that they have a lot of protection. In general, I'm in favor of this, as long as the restrictions are adequate to protect the integrity of the neighborhood. I think we want to avoid, like, especially the parking and stuff, we want to make sure that their off-street parking is provided, and make sure that, you know, it's not, like you said, creating duplexes and stuff.
Right.
We want the neighborhood to maintain its feel, just that allow, you know, I mean, we've got, like, as was said, we have plenty of these in the city already. I think that maybe we should allow them to come into the light and do this legally, so.
So really quickly on that topic, there was also a discussion among the Planning Commission. They're kind of split on that, about allowing the illegal one, you know, definitely allowing the illegal ones to become legal or not. And one thing that we did look into is how hard is it to retrofit if they did a basement without meeting those building requirements. And it is possible. It'll cost some money, but it's possible that they can do it. The hardest thing is to verify electrical wiring.
Right. And
components.
I definitely feel that the utilities, we need to follow the building code and have them to be separate entities, just, I mean, for the safety of the tenant and as well as the landlord. I think those need to be separate, so.
I had a question on the leave of absence. If we go down this road, we're talking about the owner has to occupy it so that it allows them to only rent it to 2 other adults in 1 unit. If they are on a approved leave of absence, does that give them leeway to then rent the second part of their home to another individual? I mean, that would not be my preference.
That is something, definitely something we can talk about. What an option could be that they could rent the whole house as one, and that could be a requirement. That they only rent the basement and leave the top vacant and have someone, check on it, or that they have to rent the whole thing as one unit.
So I mean, my preference would be that if they go on a leave of absence, that it doesn't turn into a
Okay.
renting to two different partners, or not partners, two different
Apartments, right.
tenants.
Okay.
In other cities, I know I'm aware of that's been a problem. Usually the biggest issue you find is parking. So the parking, you're saying, if the house comes, can you explain it to me a little bit, what you're suggesting on the parking requirements? So they can't use the existing driveway?
Right. They can't use their required parking. So if they have a 3-car garage, they would be good because the 3rd car garage could serve as the parking for the other unit. But if it's just the standard 2-car garage, it wouldn't function. And
You couldn't say the driveway, they can park in there?
no, because it says the required parking. So the required parking for a single-family home is a 2-car garage with driveway. So with a 20-foot driveway. So none of that can count towards their basement parking or their accessory parking.
Just to piggyback on that,
Mm-hmm.
I know lots of people with 3-car garages, and very few of them can actually park in that 3rd car.
Yes.
It's
So
a shop or something. Like, would we require that it was usable?
we could say usable. The other part is if they're allowing them to park in front, then that can count. If they have a 1-bedroom, that can count as their 1 stall. A lot of people won't want to share their garage anyway because it provides access to the house.
Right.
And so that's why we gave that as kind of an option. But most likely they'll just be parking in front of the 3rd car garage or on a pad.
I mean, from what I've seen, parking is usually the greatest impact
Yeah,
on that. And so
it is.
if we go down here having those around the parking, and is the additional 3rd cars that have to be like covered parking? Is that the way the code reads, or is it?
Right now, this is not covered parking.
Okay. I would be in favor of upping the acreage on the detached sheds, or not sheds, sorry. I have a comment, sheds, on here. We just went through a whole code revision
Yes.
around accessory buildings.
Buildings, yes.
I would presume
Sheds.
that this would be applicable to that around like size requirements, et cetera.
Yeah. And so what
Size restrictions.
Size restrictions, yes. They can't, they still have to comply with lot coverage requirements, meeting setbacks, everything else still applies.
Okay. I mean, I'd be more in favor of a half acre on that.
Okay.
I couldn't
I'm
put
good with
one
that.
in my yard right now, so everyone knows I have less than a half acre now. So, the only other thing is, so I think Councilman Porter already addressed that. 8,000 square foot, that's what, a R4 approximate? So we're saying an R4 if
Wait,
well, it's an R5 if it
Nine.
has an
R5.
R4 space. Yeah.
yeah,
So-
8,000 is the R5 zone. Think through the steps down.
Yeah, I mean, I'm generally okay with the suggestions as long as we up the detached item, make sure it's very applicable, crystal clear that it meets the design, size restrictions, et cetera, that we've already developed in another code. We clean up the leave of absence. I'm not comfortable with, people can document things in certain ways to make it look like they're on a leave of absence, and
Okay.
then all of a sudden we have turned in a single family to 2 different tenants, and then with the parking there, so.
Okay.
That's it.
So I want to start off with just, I've been doing this for 7 years. We don't have to change the rule. We can leave it how it is. Just because staff gives us this outline doesn't mean that we have to accept this or say, I'm okay with this, I'm okay with that. So my personal opinion is the city of Saratoga Springs is coming up on its 20th anniversary. From the very beginning, apartments, accessory dwelling units have not been allowed. 30,000 people moved into the city under that assumption. Some people, sure, maybe would like that, but a lot of people really like Saratoga Springs because it didn't allow the fact that your next door neighbor could be a duplex. A lot of people spent a lot of money trying to make the side yards nice, not just where you park an RV, but they really wanted to make them nice and part of their living space. And now all of a sudden you have people pulling a car down an RV pad and in the side where there's an extra place you can park, and then going in their side door into their basement apartment. And so for me, I just don't understand why we are changing 20 years of what people expected, because I don't know of any residents who've put in a formal request to have this changed, or is this something just because we've seen people coming to the desk? But we haven't had any resident coming with a formal request. I think that we would be opening up a really big can here, and I just don't understand why we would want to do that. With that being said, I have so many concerns with how this is, and so if I'm one of 5 votes, and if I do see this going where 3 are going to say let's allow apartments now in Saratoga Springs, we really need to dot every I and cross every T, and just so you know, hire 2 more code enforcement officers and become a police state, because you will have so many calls and so many complaints. We think that we have dog at large is our #1 issue. It will be violations on this, because nothing bugs people more than a noisy renter. Because I'm not trying to be stereotypical here. Often people who rent these are younger, and typically have friends over. Cars are a lot more. I live in an HOA, so I personally will never be impacted by this. So full disclosure, your lot size, I live in a neighborhood will never allow this, right? But just because I live there, I don't feel like I should just wash my hands of this issue for the whole city. I really want to look out for everyone's best interest. One thing that I do want to point out is I do live along the lake, and we've had Airbnb issues, and we've had to fight those as an HOA, and we've been fighting those because the city really doesn't come in and help. Oh, you're an HOA, you take care of it, though the city still should be enforcing their ordinance, but that's a whole nother story. I can take that up with staff on another time. But places like Harbor Bay, down, we're right by a marina. I'm telling you, Airbnb, you will be within walking distance of a full functioning marina. You bring your boat with you. I have an RV spot on the side when you're renting for a month. You claim in here that there's ordinance that we would protect short-term leasing from this. Regulate, monitor that. How do you monitor that? You have to have people watching with cameras, taking pictures. That's a new face. That's a new face. I mean, how do you regulate this, and how do you monitor it? I think it's just easier to keep it as it is and just say we don't allow it. We allow it for family. You can have your in-laws. You can have a child living with you and paying rent. That is allowed in the city. It's someone who is not of relation to you, who you are then renting or leasing to a stranger or a friend that is not a blood relative. So those are just some of my concerns. I mean, you hit on a couple of mine. Square lot. You gave Draper. Draper only allows separate building. They don't allow basement apartments. I thought that was really interesting that we put Draper in there. Yeah, some variety. And I don't know, Draper's sort of a nice city, right? Wouldn't we love to have property values in Saratoga Springs like they do in Draper? We would love to have our home, a 4,000 square foot home, be worth $780,000, because that's what they are in Draper, because they have protected their homes and they've protected their neighborhoods from things like this. And Draper's an old city. They had to change the ordinance away from I did a little bit extra research. They used to allow them, and then they actually took them away when they became nicer and not such a farm area, because they used to be just a farm community, right? A lot of horse property in Draper, and it's evolved over the years. So some of the things, though, just to keep in mind if we are moving down this path, it should be home frontage. It shouldn't just be square footage of lot, because the parking along, when people do come to park along on the street when they're visiting, a lot of our lots in Saratoga Springs, like it or not, are super narrow and long. So there's very little frontage. By the time you have the driveway, you can maybe sometimes fit one car. And some of these 8,000 square foot lots, you probably couldn't fit a car. So I really don't think the 8,000 I don't know when 8,000 became considering a large lot. It's not. 10,000 is considered, I would think, probably the minimum. And then to your point, I really liked your comment about the half acre with any kind of separate unit. And then in terms of meeting, I love it when we like to throw out the federal code and requirements. I mean, we are going to have plenty of multifamily housing. We are not going to have a shortage of multifamily housing in Saratoga Springs. Just want the residents here, just want you to know that even with the prop, there are people who had vested rights. Mount Saratoga alone would meet the next 25 years of requirements in multifamily housing. And that multifamily housing is facing into Eagle Mountain. We're not going to see it in Saratoga Springs. It's going to face into Eagle Mountain, but it's still in our city, and so it's going to meet any of these federal requirements that are required. So I really would wish that we would just focus our energy and all the limited resources that the planning department has on other issues besides something like this.
So I think this is a horrible idea. I think this is actually an enforcement nightmare waiting to happen. I also believe that, you know, the residents have voted, and again, I think it was a horrible piece of law the way it was passed, but nonetheless it was passed. The fact that the Proposition 6, the residents have said over and over and over they don't want multifamily housing. And I don't know how we consider this anything but multifamily. You end up with multiple cars, you end up with multiple families, you end up with renters in and out, more than just the homeowner. I just don't understand how we can consider this anything but. As far as enforcement goes, Councilman McComber mentioned the rental issues. We actually have a piece of legislation coming to us this year by Senator Deidre Henderson, making it so that we cannot stop Airbnbs if there's a rental. So it's done. So if we allow it, Airbnbs, etc. I mean, that's just one brand, obviously.
Go read the news on Airbnb and how much people love having those next to themselves, next to your house.
So if you allow it, you can't stop it, period. So that's one issue there. As far as not defining them as single-family home, or sorry, not defining them as multifamily, but defining them as single-family, most insurance companies actually do define them as multifamily. And so when you go and get your insurance, I just changed insurance companies, and one of the questions they asked is, do you have a basement rental? Do you have an accessory dwelling unit? That would have raised fees. I mean, obviously that's something that can be taken care of, but nonetheless, insurance companies consider it multifamily. So, I don't know how we can say this or not. I think that there are several issues with this. I don't know how our school districts are supposed to count kids and how they're supposed to plan for our schools. So if you have, let's say, a family upstairs, you could have a family of 8, family of 10. We don't limit the number of kids you can have. We're not China. That's on your main floor. And then you can have 2 adults and any number of kids downstairs. So you've got all of a sudden 16 kids in one house. School districts looking at that, and they're looking at a single family house, only it's not. So there's not really any way for the school district to prepare for schools and to be able to count this, and we're already overwhelmed with that, exactly. On top of that, we also allow for, in our main living, up to 4 non-related adults. And it doesn't say they can't have kids. So you could have 4 non-related adults with their kids, plus 2 adults downstairs with their kids. I mean, there's just, the enforcement on this is just an absolute nightmare. So I don't know how you can do this. Also, along with the business license, I would want to see them required, and I hope we don't pass this, but if we do, I would want to see it be required that they have to do a change of use permit, because they are adding a full business, they are adding extra traffic and everything else along with it. As far as the living space, the maximum size and minimum size, yes, a lot of our homes are, between 2,400 and 3,500 square feet, but we have a whole lot of homes that are a lot larger than that. If you take the limits off of the basement, you can end up with 2 3,000 square foot houses, or a 6,000 square foot house and a 3,000 square foot house. I mean, we've got lots of larger homes, and that then becomes, well, it may, again, what is actually accessory? We talked about this with accessory buildings also. What is really a partial use? And we talked about this with home occupations. That becomes, I think, very problematic when you have a house the size, or a secondary house larger than larger than some primary homes. How's that? So I think that's a problem. I don't think we should be doing that. It's very typical to, and I've seen accessory dwelling units in other cities, very typical to have a maximum size, whether it be attached or detached. As far as it being considered part of the accessory dwelling building, for example, if it's detached, one of the things we just passed on the accessory buildings is that they only have to be 5 feet away from your property line. When you've got a shed that's storing lawnmowers or bikes or things like that, it's a much more minimal use compared to somebody who's living there 24/7. So I think that that's problematic, that we would allow them to be 5 feet away, in some cases less, in certain HOAs that may or may not allow it. You might even have less than 5 feet on the side. You would think, yeah. So I think that you did add that? I didn't see that. Okay. In addition, you've got dwellings that are, we've got so many of these right now that are being done unpermitted. We can't even keep track of those. How are we possibly going to keep track of any more of these? So I think we're just, we open the door for so many more unpermitted uses that I don't think that we have the ability to enforce this again. So Councilman McComber mentioned, 2 more code enforcement officers. I think it may take more than that. The absence of the homeowner, I like, if you guys are going to pass it, and I don't think it's a good idea, but if it's going to be passed, the qualifying absences for the owner, I would like to see that decreased. And I know Councilman Porter mentioned something about the military and their protections that they may have. I don't think it should be longer than a year, and if there are certain exemptions for the military, then so be it. The federal government does what they want anyway. But as far as the rest of it, I don't think it should be more than a year. It should be even. As far as parking, I think that it needs to be covered or enclosed, just like the regular parking. If that means that they've got a third car garage and they want to wall it off so that they don't have access to their home, then they can do that. So I just think that there are a lot of issues that we're not considering, and I think that the residents have been pretty clear about not wanting multifamily, and basically it turns the entire city, with the exception of a couple of HOAs, into multifamily. So, right. So anyway, those are my comments on it.
So tonight, Saratoga Springs City Council meeting, Tuesday, October 4th, 2016 at 7:06 p.m. Roll call, present tonight is Councilman Porter, Councilman Wilden, Councilman McComber, Councilman Podeska, Councilwoman Barch, and myself. We have a quorum. I've asked that Councilman McComber lead us in our invocation, and then our pledge will be led by Connor Monson from Troop 1458.
Our dear Heavenly Father, as we come together as a city this night, we are truly grateful for the many blessings that Thou hast given us. We're grateful for the opportunity to live in this beautiful city in which we get to call home. Heavenly Father, we are also grateful for the involvement of our residents and the citizens of this city as we work together to create a thriving and beautiful city now and into the future. Heavenly Father, we ask that our Spirit will be with us this evening, that as we look at making decisions, we'll be able to take into mind the situations today and then what will impact the city in the future. We love Thee and we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Mm-hmm. Okay, time has been set aside for the public to express ideas, concerns, and comments. Please try and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Please be respectful in your comments, and please try to avoid repetitive comments. If you're here for the public hearing on the HADCO rezone, please hold your comments for the public hearing. Is anybody here for public input? You want to come up to the mic and state your name and address for the record? Thank you. Anybody else here for comment? Yeah, we appreciate you did that as a group. We've been here 3 hours before with the same thing said for 3 hours. So thank you. We do. And I know we've talked with Mark, our city manager, and he's going to have staff reach out for the staff report. So thank you. Okay, I will close. We did ask for him.
Yes, if he asked if there's any.
Yeah. You weren't paying attention, were you?
No, I was just surprised because there was somebody here that was going to talk about accessory dwelling units. It looked like she left, so I was kind of surprised.
Okay, we need to postpone item 6 until our first meeting in November. Council reports. We'll start. Councilman Porter.
I have no reports at this time.
Councilman Wilden?
I attended the Jordan River the Jordan River Commission and their strategy meeting. I went for part of it, and Kara, I about said Cara. Kara attended the whole thing. She does when I'm unable to attend, she does a fantastic job. She brought up a lot of good points. And from what I was able to do, there's going to be a lot of things, strategic planning, that'll be a direct benefit to us. She can maybe give more detail on that when she's here another time. I don't have her
And-
notes. My
Yeah, and
computer
if the
just
council
isn't-
would like, we can also send out the meeting summary that she puts together afterward, so you kind of know what's going on in more detail, if you're interested in a read.
Councilman Comber?
I had an opportunity to attend our Chamber of Commerce luncheon today, and the speaker I thought was very, very good. He talked about how we engage with other people, whether in our situation, when people come in as a customer, as a citizen, and the words we use and how we say them really can impact and connect from a cognitive level how people react. And I know that we've done a lot of efforts with some of these other trainings and different things. I'd love to see potentially, not necessarily this speaker, but it just made me start to think, how we interact. And we hear from residents that they were completely talked to, rude, and everything. And sometimes I wonder if people are misunderstood because they used the wrong words, or they didn't, use some of the skills that in corporate America, companies will spend a lot of money to help their employees get the ability to, some of these communication skills and these soft skills that are so valuable. And then I don't think maybe as a city, we have taken advantage of that. I've always harped that we need to run our city more like a business. That goes both ways. It means we should also be doing and continuing some more of these trainings. So, Mark, as you're looking at different opportunities, especially maybe billing, front desk people, some of those classes they might be able to take to help them understand how words have power and how they communicate and how they're addressing people. I think that could go a long ways. And it wouldn't really even hurt us as a council if we're out there engaging with residents on a regular basis. I would probably go to the class too. So I just really enjoyed it, and I think that it's a great benefit and value that the Chamber of Commerce provides our community. I'm glad that we are, whatever level member we are, trustee member, I think that's a great asset to our community, and encouraged if you have a business that you join the chamber as well. Thank you.
Nothing at this time.
They are, yes. I do have a couple other things. Did attend the Alpine School District bond meeting that they held for us, giving us information on that, trying to help get us to help promote the bond coming up. So they have this available on their website, without all my writing, of course, without all my chicken scratch. But basically, one of the things they're looking at is, obviously, in this bond is the new high school in Eagle Mountain, and at least one new middle school in Saratoga Springs. And yes, and then a couple of elementary schools and everything else. So anyway, just get some information on that. Also, if you feel so inclined, like you feel like you can do it, to help support it, they have just I support the bond, and this is why kind of a sheet that they'd love to have signatures. Mayor, with you, specifically, if you would like to lend your name and your face to it, they would love to have all the mayors. So.
Oh, whatever.
Anyway, they're trying to have that on their website where the mayors, talk about the needs of the community. And one of the interesting things is it was asked, we always hear Orem say, well, why should we support their schools kind of thing? And they said, besides the fact that it's mostly their grandkids that are out here, one of the things they brought up, and I thought this was really interesting, is they have a lot of their, is it Title I programs that are in those schools that we actually fund. So because of our growth, because of our property taxes, that's how those Title I programs are funded. So they actually couldn't run their programs without us, which is, I thought was kind of interesting.
And to add to that, the school board, the elected body, cannot advocate as much for this as they really have to be very careful where we have the ability to.
Facts and figures only. Now that it's out as a bond, they can only do facts and figures. They
so
can't
I think
advocate.
that's something that we really need to help out, step up.
So anyway, kind of interesting. So for those of you, if you'd like to, those are available. I can make copies of that or whatever. You can email them in, however you want to do that. Also received an email from Cameron Martin from UVU, and they're going to be presenting their final master plan on Friday from 12 to 1. I didn't know if Because I think, Chris, aren't you? Okay. Anyway, so it's 12 to 1. They're going to do lunch and things like that. So I can go. I don't know if you're available to go to that or not. I can forward the email. I can forward that email to you. That is your assignment, right? Yeah. That's what I thought. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So anyway, so you can do that. It's huge. It's pretty big. Yeah, we didn't get much, unfortunately. We worked with them a lot, but we didn't get a lot. They're just not ready to come out here quite yet. So, and then along also on Friday it's the Great Pumpkin Saratoga Springs. So it's our big fall festival, and that is at Shea Park, and that is from 6:30 to 8:30, I believe. And the train's running, so they're going to have the train up and running. So that's very exciting. So come out. Owen. 5:30 to 8. Thank you for the correction. Appreciate that. It's pretty awesome. There's going to be lots of activities going on besides just the train. I believe the food trucks are going to be out. And one of the things that face painting, all kinds of fun activities. Oh, that's right. They are showing the movie too. Your screen. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Bring everybody out. One of the things I'd like to ask staff, I think this is our first big foray into Shea Park and the activities there. So we really need to be watching it as far as traffic and see how that goes and see how parking goes. So, yay! So if we can make sure we've got extra help out maybe that day, it might be good. Or the church over there, so, yeah, okay. So those are some exciting things coming up. And then we've got, like Mayor said, we've got our big meetings, our MAG meeting and whatnot coming up this week. So, and COG got canceled, you saw that? That's it.
Just real quick, this is more of a request for staff, and since it's only been 2 weeks, my expectation is not that you would be able to address it now, but maybe in a staff report down the road. Councilman McComber brought up utilizing recording phone calls for a quality assurance.
Yes.
I can actually give you an update as soon as you turn it over to staff.
So I'm going to keep taking longer. So. No, that was just, yeah. No, there was, I won't call it negative or positive feedback I received. I just received a lot of feedback that there was interest in it, if that makes sense.
I think it's a great idea.
Yes. So what we did since the last council meeting is we began recording some of those calls that we were receiving. And what we found is that our current system, we quickly filled all of the memory that we have in our current system. So we've looked into it, and there's several issues associated with it. We did go back and we did audit. I had Shalise go back and audit her employees. She randomly selected certain patterns, and she would just go back and then listen to those calls and audit those calls. She has subsequently, reported back to me earlier today kind of what she found, and she's going to initiate some customer service training. Wasn't huge issues. She didn't come across in her audit any specific issues that were large. However, did they know they were being recorded? They did. But it was also over several days, so I think you kind of start to get into that pattern. But anyway, we will be implementing some customer service training because of that. We did find, though, that kind of what Councilmember McComber was indicating earlier. I think that there's definitely some room for improvement, so we're going to be working on that. The longer term strategy is a little bit more complex. For us to be able to record every single call and to be able to store every call, it trickles into kind of the transparency issues, and we would have to record those calls and then store those calls for 3 years from a storage standpoint. And so we're talking, that's what Kevin was looking into it. And so unfortunately, we would have to amend our
Data center right there.
Yeah, we'd have to amend our record retention schedule. Otherwise, we're going to have to retain according to the state schedule. This is a bigger issue and a more global issue that we'll be bringing back to you as a council, because we find with body cams and other things, I mean, there's just a tremendous amount of data that we are now gathering. And so this we can keep buying more and more hard drive space, which is fine. The problem really isn't that. It's how do we catalog it? How do we manage it? How do we monitor that? And how do we, manage the overall,
Are we looking into cloud space, Amazon Web Service?
It's not really the space that's really the problem, because we can get terabytes for really relatively cheap, and that's not really it. It is really more the, how do we catalog it? How do we access it? How do we record it? How do we make it so that it's searchable, so that we can find data? And with the large amount of data that we're getting, it's a cumbersome task. So we're going to be looking more into that. I just wanted to give you that update. I actually had that as a note before you brought that up. Sure. Well, and that's just it. Those, like some of the technology with like the body cams, you hit record and then it just records a long file until you hit stop. And, yeah, but you know what's on it. You know at what point do you have the data? So the ability to search that and retrieve information from it is complex. We'll be bringing this back more to you as a council as we're looking at it. It is a much more global issue. And so we are going to continue to head down that road. There were a couple of things that we did want to do with staff reports real quickly. Kimber, you had an introduction.
Yes, so we have hired a new planner, and his name is Jeff Adderman. He is actually, it looks like he left. I told him he could stay for the first 45 minutes or so we missed that. But anyway, we have a new planner that we'll be introducing to you shortly. He is just barely getting his feet wet and is looking with big eyes at all the projects that are coming his way. So it's very exciting, and we're very happy to have him on board. So he was sitting in the back in case you saw, but he probably looks like he left with everybody else. So thanks.
Mayor, I did have a couple of other items. First of all, last council meeting you asked if Chief Burton could come back and give a report to the council of some of the traffic monitoring we've been doing in some of the areas where we received complaints at the start of the school year for speeding and other things. So Chief Burton, if you could please give us a quick update on that.
And let's make sure that's on, thanks. Just two locations to report. The first on Aspen Hills Boulevard. The posted speed limit there is 25. Over the last month, the police department has conducted a significant amount of enforcement along Aspen Hills Boulevard. We've tried to do this different times of the day, different days of the week, weekdays and weekends. We did 2 speed surveys using an unmarked car. We had 61 cars in the first and over 100 vehicles in the second survey. These were, one was in the mid-afternoon period and one was in the 5 o'clock to 6 o'clock rush hour period of time. On the midday, the average speed in both directions was 23.5 miles an hour. So that's under the posted limit. The highest vehicle measured at that time was 31 miles per hour. During the 5 to 6 p.m. Survey on a weeknight, average speed in the westbound direction was 26.6 miles per hour with a single high of 37 miles per hour. The average speed in the eastbound direction was 24.3 miles per hour with a single high of 28 miles per hour. So the averages are pretty close to the posted speed limits. We only had one period of time where we noticed, and we were trying to pay attention to this during all the enforcement conducted and also during the surveys, about where or which vehicles or how many vehicles were using Aspen Hills as a cut through to get over to 800 West. And the period of time that we discovered it was being used the most was between 6:15 p.m. and 7 p.m. So interestingly enough, it wasn't being used very much between 5 and 6, but then after 6 p.m. it started to kick up. So I guess. Our commuters get here around 6. Okay. Probably. In any case, in all the time that we were there, a total of 12 citations were issued. 8 were speeding, 1 for a stop sign violation, 1 for an ATV, and 2 for expired registrations. So that's the roll-up on Aspen Hills. Are there any questions on that?
For Owen, some of the council's requests, we can get this on Facebook, so the residents who are asking.
If we could, we're going to be meeting with those folks and talking with them, and so we'll provide this information to them as part of that. Perfect. And
Chief, out of those, do you know how many of those were locals versus
Well, we found that of most of the tickets, citations we wrote, of those 12, I think 7 or 8 of them lived in the neighborhood immediately right there. One was a school district employee, and 2 were from Eagle Mountain. So we have at least 2 out of the 12 cited persons that were from Eagle Mountain.
Most for locals.
Yeah. Stillwater Drive, posted limit is 25.
You know, not for the purpose of me publishing it, but could I get that, could we get it in written format, so if someone asks questions?
We'll circulate a copy of his memo to you.
That would be great, thank you. I won't publish it on Facebook, you know,
I mean, it's technically gonna be available anyway on the website, right? So there's really not a purpose in
Just happened in a
not
public
publishing.
meeting.
There's no, yeah, there's nothing. And I have, just by way of information, I have shared some of this information with a couple of neighbors that have written us emails with their concerns about that in the area. So we've shared some of this with them already. On Stillwater Drive, the posted speed limit is 25, and over the last month, we've conducted an extensive amount of enforcement, again, on weekdays, weekends, different hours of the day. I will say that in our enforcement efforts, we have a little bit more capability to do it during the day because we have fewer officers on duty later on, plus it's busier in the evenings. But we have tried to hit all the times that are of concern, including weekends. But we had one survey using a marked unit, and the average speed was 23.9 miles per hour. No surprise there. But 2 surveys were conducted using an unmarked car. The first survey was middle of the day. Westbound traffic had an average speed of 22.8 miles per hour with a single high of 27 miles an hour. The eastbound traffic had an average speed of 26 miles per hour with a single high of 31 miles per hour. Actually, east is, yeah, downhill, so a little bit faster there, but still not too bad. In no cases were any ATVs observed, and no ATVs were cited. In the second survey,
the mayor was in Harvest Hills when he, or Aspen Hills when he
in a
got
different neighborhood that time. Second survey in the late afternoon period around the rush hour, close to the rush hour period, showed an average speed of 23 miles per hour with a single high of 27 miles per hour. Again, no ATVs observed. And in all the time we spent there, we only issued 6 citations for speeding. I don't have information, and the highest speed noted was 37 miles an hour. I don't have information about where those people live, but most of them lived in, a couple of them that I know about lived in the neighborhood, and there's no cut through there. So
There's no cut through.
yeah, it's pretty much people who live in the area.
Yeah.
Mark, you're gonna get back with the emails like to forward to those people, or?
We certainly can.
I have a quick question that's somewhat related, and I forgot to bring it up earlier. Can I bring it
Yeah.
up now? So I met with some Webelos. That's what we get to do often as elected officials or Cub Scouts and Webelos with why you're here and the different things. And while I was there, I actually noticed it, and the family brought it up. But there were like 12 buses, 15 buses that were cutting through, Thunder Ridge Elementary. They cut through
Sunset
the
Haven.
neighborhood, Sunset Haven, to avoid the 4th South and to avoid Lakeside because, is it Lakeside? No, what's it called? Lakeview?
Foothill.
Lakeview Terrace?
Lake,
or
no, what's the academy there?
Lakeview Academy.
Lakeview Academy.
Academy, because it slows them way down, and they have all the traffic.
And they ripped through that neighborhood.
And they're cutting through really fast, like really fast. Like a huge bus going 30, 35 miles an hour is really fast. Because they don't stop as quick, and they're using it as a cut through. And they said, and most of the time the buses are empty. So I'm not sure this is you, but we need to maybe get a hold of the school district. They cannot be using, Eagle Mountain buses cannot be cutting through, because that's what they're doing. They're cutting through to avoid the high school and to get that back right-hand turns into the parking garage.
Yeah.
So I just noticed that, and so when you're talking traffic, it reminded me, and I promised
Maybe we
them
can
I'd bring
create
it
a speed table in the road that's weight related, and if you're over a certain weight, tire rippers jump out.
up. Well, and there's a tight corner. When that was designed, it wasn't designed very well. Right at the end, there's a really tight corner because people park on both sides of the road because their kids are playing sports in the high school field, the junior high field. So they park in the neighborhood because it's quicker than parking in the parking lot of the junior high and the high school. And so it becomes super full of cars, and then the buses are flying through there, and I'm not kidding. I went, they said, they would not let me go out through Thunder Ridge. They said, you have to leave and go home, even though it's not the right fast way for you, but you have to experience it. It took me 8 minutes to get just from there, but close to Thunder Ridge and around that corner and out because of the traffic that was created there. So I know we don't red stripe our curbs in our city, but I really do think that there maybe would be a need for red striping half of that corner so that people can only park on one half. But I know we don't do that regularly, but there's a real problem there.
I had actually talked to, I'm trying to remember who it was in the school district. It wasn't Rob. Anyway, I talked to somebody, and he actually said that they're not supposed to do that they're supposed to stay on the main roads.
If it's okay with council, I'll contact Jess Christian, who's over that. And we met with them earlier this year to discuss busing issues. And so I've got a note here, and I'll follow up with them.
Yeah. I followed a bus through that neighborhood, and I have a video if you would like that for your meeting.
have this-
Does it include audio of you following behind them?
You have, the,
Wait, you were using your phone while you're driving.
have you got the, do you have the speed of the bus?
You need his driver's license.
Michael,
Wilden's rubbing off on
can
you.
you clarify which corner?
These are residents
so we
talking.
can clarify, is it the corner of 800 West and that road that goes in?
So what's the name of the road that goes along Thunder Ridge? So if you're turning in to go to Thunder Ridge, you go straight into the neighborhood?
Murray Way.
And Marie, and then the end where you turn to go out. There's like a little dead end street that goes to the junior high and high school. Yeah. Why we dead ended into a field that would never. Yeah. To be a big junior high maybe. Okay. Because it was before my time. This precedes all of us, but yeah. Thank you. Sorry to.
Sure.
Yes, thank you, Chief.
Just on another note, we will have an officer assigned and dedicated solely to the Fall Festival at Shea Park. He'll take care of any issues you have there.
Thank you.
The one last item I had, and I apologize for being so long with staff updates this evening. We do have the extension of the Market Street soil remover contract ready. It would extend the contract. It's basically from December of this year out through December of next year, December 31st of 2017. That'll allow us to take and use that soil over, hopefully in the sports complex. And so Kevin has said that he'd be okay if I just signed that. It wasn't a material thing as long as the council was okay with me moving forward and doing that. And so it's a simple extension on that. Okay, that's all I have.
Thank you. We have a public hearing for the Hadco Rezone Master Development Agreement, Ordinance 16-23.
All right, Mayor and Council, this is a public hearing for a rezone and related master development agreement for a Hadco property. This is located west of Wildflower, north of SR 73. This brought to mind the notification that we need to amend our location map because this is actually part of the city now, right here. So we'll get on that. But what we're looking at is, and I apologize, the mouse gets a little jumpy over here. We're looking at property 40.99 acres right here. So for orientation, Redwood Road here, Crossroads, AKA 73 here, Wildflower, Harvest Hills, etc. The mouse jumped really far. And you hit the next page. It dropped. Okay, thank you. So here you can see the property outlined in red. It is those 3 parcels. They were annexed into the city at the same time as the Springs development, which is the property that you see immediately to the north of these 3 parcels. At that time, the property was zoned agriculture, and the applicants are now requesting to rezone to industrial. They do have an adjacent mining operation in Eel Mountain and mining activity occurring on this property, and that is the only zone in the city in which mining is permitted, currently industrial. Now, the master development agreement that accompanies this, what it simply states is that the property will be subject to the industrial zone, and they are vested for the uses which are allowed in the industrial zone. Any new permits that they would submit, however, for future development would be subject to all of the city's ordinances. So going down the road in the future, if they wanted to change the use from mining to something else, they would come through the typical process, site plan or subdivision or whatever it may be, to get approval from the city. So with that, this is a public hearing on both of those. The master development agreement is not a public hearing. The rezone itself is a public hearing. The Planning Commission did hold a public hearing and forwarded a positive recommendation with some slightly modified conditions, which were outlined in your staff report. And so, Sarah, can you hit the next, please? Thank you. So again, here we're looking at the proposed use of mining. Currently, the general plan already designates this property as industrial, so one of the staff findings in the report is that it's consistent with our current general plan. We discussed the standards for future development. At the public hearing, some members of the Planning Commission brought up activities that Eagle Mountain has been undergoing. What Eagle Mountain just did was adopt a moratorium on future mining permits within their mining overlay to conduct some studies on the impacts. They've agreed to share that information with us, and HADCO is already actually complying with most of the conditions that they are expecting to put in place. So I can let the applicants weigh in on that if you have any questions. Now, the Planning Commission recommendation did include a statement that all of the uses allowed in the industrial zone should be permitted. Not permitted, but permitted or conditional as they are identified in the current code. And next page, Sarah, sorry. So with that, your options are approvals. And so here I have on the slide the language from your staff report for approval with conditions. You also have the option to continue it to a future date if you have need for additional information, and of course denial. However, we did not articulate the findings for denial, so if you chose to deny, you would need to articulate those. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Hadfield, do you have anything you want to add before we open the public hearing?
Okay, I don't have much to say. Brad Cahoon with the law firm of Snell and Wilmer, acting for the applicant. We concur with what was said by staff and in the staff report, and we'll just reserve time to respond to any public comments or questions from the council. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, we'll open up the public hearing. Is anybody here for comment on the HADCO rezone? Everybody at once? Okay. I will close the public hearing. Okay, we'll start with the council. Councilwoman Barch.
Thanks, Mayor. I just have a couple of questions. So normally when we see an MDA, we see a development plan along with it, and this kind of doesn't have one because it's a mine, and it is what it is. With this, one of the parts of the MDA talks about the water and the dedication and all of that. If they were to come in and do anything different, increase the amount of mining, I mean, I don't know what the water requirements are for, mining and that kind of thing, but they would have to come back in and dedicate additional water. How does that all work?
That's a good question. I'm going to let Kevin weigh in on this particular detail.
So yes, they would have to meet all our requirements, including dedication of water, providing the source and the distribution, and all those requirements that we currently have. Right now, the non-conforming use is permitted, and it would be allowed to continue without that requirement. Whatever county requirements they were subject to, they would have had to meet those at the time that they started that use. But yes, to change that use for any other type of use other than mining, they wanted to add a facility there, they'd have to bring water and
then would
dedicate
that require an amended MDA then? Amendment to MDA?
No, because the MDA basically says they're vested with the uses and the zone, and that's essentially it. Everything else, they have to meet the current version of the code, including our water requirements.
Also, on our packet, let me see if I can figure out which page this actually is. Hang on just a second. When you go through the actual code and the requirements there, one of my questions I had, and this is more general, not specific to their, well, partially to their parcel, but not just to their parcel, is the setbacks. So front setback is, no less than 50 feet, and that's fine. My concern comes in the sides and the rear setbacks, where our code states that if you're adjacent to, or if you're budding commercial, industrial, agricultural, that you don't necessarily have to have, and this is for the building, a building itself, you don't have to have a setback at all. So I'm thinking that maybe this should be adjusted. We need to have some kind of setback mandatory. You can't have it on the property line. That's just silly. And we don't have that in any of our other zones, I believe. So we probably ought to fix that. Okay. Well, because we don't have anything. Right, exactly. So just a building should be on the property line. So we need to fix that for our code in general. And then also likewise, and this is specific to the mining process. Again, we haven't ever really dealt with this before. And there may be other entities that regulate this, but we don't have anything for the actual mining process. Can they mine right up to the property line? Do they have to be a certain distance back? And I just don't know what those rules and regulations are, and we don't have anything in our code. So that's something that I would like to know.
Can I just piggyback on that since you bring it up? Is it the county, if the county has rules, then they still are subject to that, right?
Yeah, so they would be vested under that because they are a non-conforming
So if the county
use.
has certain distances from property lines, then regardless of what we do here, they're still under that obligation.
For the mining uses
the mining
only.
So for mining next to the, not for the building, but for if they mine too close to the property line, right?
Well, and they'd be subject to the state requirements too.
Okay.
They have a mining permit with the state.
Yes, we have a large mine permit regulated by the state. There's no requirement on mine control,
To avoid collapsing and both covered.
So I wonder then if within our code, especially for the mining area, we ought to just reference the federal or the state code that they need to be, yeah.
John,
Okay.
can you come speak to the microphone, just so we have it on the record?
Sorry, my bad. So anyway, that's something I think we should
We just
add
wanted
in.
to draw you in.
Just that, just that we reference those.
We do that on other parts of
Those-
our code, so it's a good idea.
Yeah, say it again, just for the record, John, sorry.
So, John Hadfield, I need to get my address. My home address or my business address?
Either one.
1850 North, 1450 West, Lehigh. We have a large mine permit that all this is tied into. We're actually regulated by about 7 different entities. DEQ, it's heavily regulated. So, again, there's a lot of protection there. And we come out and we get at least quarterly inspections from different entities, biannual from MSHA and stuff like that.
So are you, just for clarification on that, do you want their permit attached to the development agreement as an exhibit? You said you wanted to reference their existing
No.
permit, but.
No. In our code, we need to make a change to our industrial code. This is for Kimber. This isn't
Okay.
right now, but for our industrial code, we need to reference state code
State
within our
requirements.
code. Yeah.
For mining use, okay.
So like I said, it's not specifically just to them. Obviously, it's for our entire industrial, anytime we have a mining project that was gonna come in, which won't happen again, which probably won't happen
Yeah.
again, but.
That's a good idea.
There are some setbacks. You're allowed to mine up to it, but then there is some setbacks that you're required to do it. Our permit. But obviously, you don't have it.
Is that standard to a large mine permit? Okay.
Councilman Podeska?
I have no problem with approving the rezoning. Obviously, you need to have that industrial zone, and the city does too, to complete our availability of different enterprises. I was wondering how the road access portion of the agreement's doing.
So I've met with Collins Brothers rep Paul, and we've submitted some paperwork to him. We're waiting for him to get back. We have talked to the power company and waiting for them. It took about 4 weeks for them to assign a rep. know that Mark had talked to somebody there as well. And I think that's just a bureaucracy into its own, and so we've reached out, I know Mark's reached out, and I understand, and like I said, with Collins Brothers, I think we're all in alignment. I think some of it's just working through the issues. We've been reaching out and we're just waiting. Anything that Mark can do to help us work, he's got a bigger pick than we do. We welcome that.
It's ceremonial only.
Okay, I feel the same way. I mean, I was a little bit surprised. It took, seriously, it took 6 weeks for him to assign somebody to the case. So we're doing everything we know how.
Should have just told them they had a line down, they would have come out sooner.
Well, again, and they did say that somebody from the city had reached out to them as well. So I think it's just, again, me and Mark, we've been working through it. It's just that process with Utah Power and Light is going to be a little more painful. The Collins Brothers I've met with twice. And my understanding is, Mark, you've talked to them as well.
Yeah.
And my understanding is we're all in agreement. It's just a matter of working through, and then always going to have to go back to the sisters. Actually, oh my God.
I don't have anything else.
Perfect. Councilman McComber?
No, I appreciate the clarification, Councilwoman Barch. I thought that was really insightful to catch that for future. She's our resident code expert for sure, so I appreciate that. I also appreciate you working with the staff to get this figured out and worked out, and we could do this in an appropriate way and how we're doing it today. So I think that obviously the master development agreement is a key part of this process for the rezone. I wouldn't approve a rezone without a master development agreement. So thank you for working that out, Kevin, and getting that all worked out. So thanks.
Councilman Wilden?
I don't have too many comments. It's just, this has been, things around this has been a discussion item since day one of meeting. So it's nice to, so it's nice to put some of these things to bed. So
Councilman Porter?
No, I don't have anything. I think that was a good catch by Councilwoman Barch with the code, but I don't have any other issues.
With that, I will entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve Hadco rezone master development agreement ordinance 16-23 dated today with all staff findings and conditions.
I'll second.
We have a first from Councilwoman Barch, a second from Councilman Porter. Any further discussion on the motion on the table? Do a roll call. Porter?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
McComber?
Aye.
Tedesca?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for your patience.
Thanks, guys.
I will.
Okay, a few business items. We have a second.
We need to do rezoning? Or did that take care of both?
Yeah.
Took care of both.
Yep. I thought you were going to say you were changing your vote. Business items. We have secondary and culinary water system project agreements with Hanson, Allen and Luce. Engineers for design, engineering service, and contract management for the following projects. Resolution R16-53, Foothill North Pipeline not to exceed $106,300. Foothill South Pipeline and Pump Station not to exceed $197,100. Zone 1 North Water Line Project not to exceed $148,700. Zone 2 North Pond and Pump Station not to exceed $315,000. And Zone 2 South Pond and Transmission Line not to exceed $271,300. Is it standard to round up to the nearest hundred?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? I missed some of that. Just kidding.
As printed.
Just as maybe a point of order when the motion is made, you can always say as stated on the agenda, so you don't have to read the whole thing. Just
Look at people falling asleep just by reading it. Mayor and council, I gave somewhat of a discussion on this last council meeting, and I provided a staff report that goes into this in great depth. In essence, what this is carrying out all of the water projects that we have talked about over the summer about how we're going to try and get ahead of our water needs. And so this is the conclusion of getting the engineering going on all of this. And just as an update, we were meeting earlier with one of the developers that's going to be providing about $6 million in private contributions to fund some of these projects. Earlier today, we're going to have an agreement back to you, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, but we're going to be moving forward with the design in the interim. So if you'd like, I'd be more than happy to go into the project details, or I'd be happy to answer any specific questions you may have.
We've been through this a lot. Yes. Okay, I will entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the secondary and color water system project agreements with Hanson and Luce as stated on the agenda.
And resolution.
And resolution, attached resolution R16-53 dated today.
I'll second that.
Okay, I have a first from Councilman Porter, a second from Councilman McComber. Any further discussion on the motion? Do a roll call.
Findings and conditions.
There weren't any?
Okay. Councilwoman Barch.
Aye.
Podeska.
Aye.
McComber.
Aye.
Wilden.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Item 2, Marina Pump Station Site Plan and Conditional Use Permit. That was a little too short, Mark. A little
Okay.
disappointed. Just kidding. I know.
Give a report.
Okay.
I'll delegate that to Wilden.
Oh, okay. Okay, so this is located at the marina in the south end of the city. And so you can see the location of the proposed pump station, the existing sanitary sewer lift station, and the existing restroom. All right, here's a close-up of the site. So here's the existing jetty, and then you can see the utility line that will be installed, and the building itself. The mouse is really jumpy over here. The building itself, you can see that as well. And this is for the secondary water in the south part of the city. And so the diagram has just, this is the same diagram, but the direction of the diagram has just changed. So, and then this is an example of the proposed landscaping. We had a kind of a very brief staff discussion on whether or not we should add trees in this location. So if the council wants to discuss that, it's included as a condition that there may be trees in xeriscaping. So if you have more to add, that would be great. The reason for trees would obviously be to enhance the site, but this is a tall structure itself. It's the maximum height in the zone, and then trees could potentially block views, and so that could be a concern in addition to the in addition to the building. And then also there's maintenance and upkeep, and trees are something we could add when the park is developed further in this location.
Is that a drawing site plan? I'm just curious. Is that a drawing?
So part of it is,
Site
a
plan.
part of it is, so yeah, one recommendation we had, and that is being formally added to the plans, is that this sidewalk be added because we're sort of blocking the existing access. And so that sidewalk will allow people to get down to the jetty and to the beach area. Here's the proposed structure.
We have to give staff a little hard time because this is their, not a developer.
If
The
you'd
applicants
approve us
right
hiring
here.
a landscape architect, we could come in with something more.
So these are the applicants, so we're giving them a little bit of a hard time. So I'll apologize if you think we're being flippant. It's just because
So-
we got to give them a hard time.
With Utah Lake being low, is there a chance they're gonna fill it up enough we can use this pump?
As a matter of fact, part of this project is, and this is really kind of the big part of the project, is that we're going to actually go out and do some dredging. And so the marina, where these pipes are going to be, we're actually going to go and dredge kind of along the edge of the jetty out. So, it's going to be 4 or 5 feet deeper than what it currently is, which puts it at pretty much the same depth as the bottom part of the lake. And then actually, once we get out into the marina, it's going to fan out in kind of a V out in front of the marina, and we're going to dredge a tremendous amount of materials out there as well. So in essence,
I was just down there and standing on the docks, I'm 6'2", and you can see the high water mark where the docks had floated.
Right.
Down almost 6 feet.
Right, and so actually, I mean, that's kind of the irony is with as low as the lake is, this is the best time in the world to dredge that
Oh,
thing,
yeah.
because, you know, we can almost drive out there with our
I
tractors,
was
so.
going to mention to Mayor, the only reason it wasn't lower than that is because the docks are sitting on the ground. They can't go any
Oh,
lower.
yeah, that's the only reason. But
So-
it's 6 feet in the marina is.
Yes, so as part of this, we will be doing quite a bit of dredging, which would allow for that. There's other things that we're working on that would potentially allow us to acquire additional water rights that would allow us to, you know, based on inflow of waters at different locations, to allow us to take water out. So there's quite a bit going into it. It's pretty complex, but in answer to your question, at some point, if the lake, you know, for example, this year, there was discussion about stopping any additional irrigation out of the lake, and the water users have come together. My understanding is that that's happened twice in about the last 30, 40 years, this year being one of them. The other was like early 2000s when I think we dredged this before about that time. So fundamentally, we should be creating a channel deep enough to allow water to flow in, and as long as we're able to pull water from the lake, we'd be able to continue to use this.
And then just to continue on, there's just a few more slides. The proposed elevations would match the existing structures, material and color-wise, and staff recommends approval. Condition number 2 is regarding the landscape plan, and just talks about the possibility of trees and xeriscaping, but does recommend tall shrubs and planter beds around the building.
If I could interject one other thing, and it's kind of the bigger project. We have put into the bid documents a bid alternative, which would allow us to dredge the entire marina. And so we'll be getting a cost estimate on that as part of this. Although we can't fund it with the water funds, we will be getting a bid on that. And so when we come back to you with the bid, we can make the determination if it's enough value to the council to dredge the rest of the marina so that it's approximately the same depth throughout the entire marina. Right now, it would just really be the channel that would allow the water to come in, but it would not allow necessarily for boat access like this year because of the depth of the marina. And we are, on that same note, we are requesting from the Utah Lake Commission. We received a grant from them for some other improvements, and we're asking them if they would consider allowing us to change our application to allow for dredging this year while we're in there doing it as part of the economies of scale. So we may be able to do that with an existing grant if we're able to modify the scope of that grant. So looking at a lot of different options with this.
I think the only comment I see right off is xeriscaping. I know that's nails on a chalkboard for Councilwoman Barch. Maybe we could use local scaping, the new term. So,
I just had a question. The picture you show is, I'm assuming, the pump house or the booster. That one, yeah. It doesn't have a cupola, but then the other one, the elevation you show does. Like, I'm just wondering why we're adding a cupola. Is it?
No, actually, that's what the windows are, the skylights, yeah. I believe the cupola is purely artistic in nature, and if, Gordon, is there anything, if you don't want it,
Does
I
it
don't
have
care one way or the
Does
other,
it have
but-
something to do with the final?
we were just trying to make
Park.
the,
It's supposed to be like a lighthouse look.
Yeah. Only mostly artistic.
so do you have a preference for it if it's not integral to the functioning of the building?
Honestly, what it looks like to me is it looks like they took the pump house down at Pony Express and 800 West and went, oh, look, we'll use the same plan.
It is fine. I just say leave it.
So it looks good.
Fits the look and feel of the name.
Would you like a chicken weather vane on top?
Okay, I will entertain a motion without a chicken weather vane.
I will
Did
move
we want to
that-
talk about landscaping, guys? We didn't ask.
I will move that we let Shelley talk. longer.
They asked us about landscaping, we didn't actually answer them.
I know. I was gonna do that on additional comments, but go ahead now.
Okay.
You
I'll
beat us.
just-
You beat
I'll
us to the
just
motion.
interrupt it instead.
You beat us to the motion.
So on the landscaping, I definitely want to get that sidewalk in, no matter what. I think that that's going to be integral to connectivity within the site. I think that that's fantastic. The trees, depending on how close you put, may actually interfere with removal of pumps when they need to do maintenance on them.
The cloud trees live pretty far away.
Yeah. I mean, so I think that's something that, you know, the engineers, which I don't know, you guys probably aren't good at landscaping, but as far as, anyway, but that's something I think that should be site plan specific, what's functional in this
Not a huge
particular area.
oak tree.
And then since we're going to be, I mean, we need to do a little restoration, in my personal opinion, but it's night time. So, and then as far as the rest of the landscaping, honestly, we're going to be doing the other half of the marina project coming up, so I'd rather just leave it and make it part of the whole process.
All integrated.
That's my personal opinion.
And in all honesty, that's kind of what our thought process was as well. And so, absolutely correct, we did not put a whole lot of design work into it, but we felt that we're going to be spending a lot more design on other things, and rather than having an engineering firm bring in an landscape architect, it probably would serve us better to do that else.
We've got
at
Rick.
other times.
The condition says may, right?
Yep.
All right.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion now.
I move that we approve the marina pump station site plan and conditional use permit, including staff findings and conditions.
I second.
I have a first from Councilman Wilden, a second from Councilman Podeska. Any further discussion on the motion? Roll call, Councilman Podeska.
Aye.
Councilwoman Barch.
Aye.
Councilman McComber.
Aye.
Wilden.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. We have communities that care.
Mayor, Council, this is the standard annual renewal of the contract with the county and would recommend approval. Thank you.
Okay. Is there any discussion, anybody that doesn't care?
I just really appreciate all this group does for our city, so.
It
I'll make
is.
a motion.
It's a big,
Yeah, it's
big
great.
benefit to
Yeah.
the community. So
For those that are out in the audience that don't know what this is our drug prevention program. The Communities That Care is our drug prevention program that works with the schools and works with the
They're the ones-
county on
The
the
county
drug
and the
collection
different
day.
You can
and-
collection, bring your old pills,
Prescription pill bottles in, things like
prescription
that.
pills to be disposed of properly and that kind of things. They do a lot of great research too. But you ready for a motion?
Yes.
I move that we approve the Communities That Care interlocal cooperation agreement with Utah County for substance abuse prevention services and Communities That Care prevention model resolution R16-54 dated today.
second.
Okay, I have a first from Councilman McComber, a second from Councilwoman Barch. Any further discussion? Okay, roll call, Councilman McComber.
Aye.
Podeska.
Aye.
Barch.
Aye.
Wilden.
Aye.
Porter.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Special Assessment Bond, Series 2016, Mount Saratoga Assessment Area, consideration for adoption of, as stated on the agenda.
Mayor,
I thought you would like be praising me.
I don't get a vote. so-
Mayor and Council, Resolution R1655 is really a continuation of some of the items we've been discussing in the past. This really is to move the Special Assessment Bond Series forward. We have Jonathan Ward here. We also have Joe, and I can't think of your last name. Just Joe, who's the property owner. But if you'd like, Jonathan's here to help answer any questions. Specifically, this is going to kind of continue the process for us in.
It's a lot changed from 2 weeks ago.
Jonathan, mostly language, and this is actually the special assessment area resolution and ordinance, and it's just further defining everything that's going to be in it.
Like 500 acres, thank you, Mr. Jackson. Approximately 500 acres of property that is to be developed. The improvements put in a lot of the major trunk line improvements, water, sewer lines, some of the road improvements as well, and help further the development. The city sells the bonds, the property owner leverages their property as the means for repayment of the bonds. It's a nice way, we think, for the city to get about $6.5 million of public infrastructure at the expense of the property owner. And they benefit from it as a property owner because they're able to borrow at a tax-exempt interest rate. It's not as good of an interest rate as the city can borrow. Adam, right now we're looking at about a 4.5% for a 10-year financing. As I recall, when we talked about the water financing, it was, I think we said around 2.5% for 20-year financing for the city. So not as good, but it's a benefit to the property owner, and they're willing to do this. And this resolution basically says, let's designate the area. Following the resolution, there's another matter for your consideration called the assessment ordinance. The assessment ordinance is the tool by which a lien is placed on Mr. Pierce's property out there in western Saratoga Springs. And it will be a lien like unto a property tax lien. Supersedes all other deeds of trust and other liens. And Mr. Pierce has signed a consent to that lien, saying, I understand what it is and I consent to it. This is valuable for us. Let's move forward. We've taken great pains with staff and with the city's bond attorneys up at Ballard Spar to protect the city's interests so that the city's not stuck holding the bag, not holding the financial bag. If for whatever reason there's a default, it doesn't fall back to the city as the city's obligation. You do have the requirement to go through a foreclosure process, and that's a little bit time consuming, but the expenses are all basically rolled into the property foreclosure. So
They're actually reserving all of the funds that cost basically what we resell property are reserved in
yeah. We've got multiple reserve funds set aside, partially out of bond proceeds, partially from the property owner who's fronting close to $1 million to sit in funds ready to go if there were ever an emergency. But I'm happy to entertain any questions too.
Any questions from the council? I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor and council. So we did kind of have some last minute changes to help provide some additional protection in case there is a default, and it basically relates, I believe, to the bondholders or protection for them, but also reserving the right to the city to have basically a remaining easement over the property so we can provide that infrastructure. Jonathan, do you want to speak to those last minute changes? I know they just came in this afternoon. I have them up. Kimber, can you pull them up off of the common drive? I think we need to go over those and incorporate those in the motion.
And so my apologies. I didn't get a chance to review some of these last week, and then earlier today is when I brought this up. What we don't want to have happen is something akin to what happened with the South SID area here in the city. Excuse me. What we did was when things went bad, which I don't think is going to be the case here, but we ended up having water tanks and other infrastructure that was built, but that was actually in the name of the developer and the property owner. And so after things went belly up and bankrupt and whatever, we ended up not actually having clear ownership of some of the infrastructure that was built and being used to service residences in the city. So it just took a while to clean that up. And so this change came as a suggestion to me late today. And it basically, I just want to make sure that any infrastructure that's built or that's being used to service the area, we have easements and or ownership of that infrastructure if there were ever a default. So we wanted to make sure that that was clarified. And then another thing that I think is an important thing to note, and I just learned this earlier today myself, is in 2016 there were some changes at the legislature regarding special assessment areas. In essence, what it would do is previously when we foreclosed on some property, if there weren't buyers, then the city was required to pay and actually cash fund the purchase of the properties. the language changed, so now it basically is just a transfer directly to the city. And so one of the changes that we were also making, and I don't know how it is in the final language tonight, but it basically would, if there were a default, the property would basically become the city's, and then what we would do is we would turn that property over to the bondholders as full payment for any outstanding debt. So with the residual easement for the infrastructure that we talked about earlier. So that's really what the language is geared for this evening. So with that, we'd be happy to turn it over to you for any questions, or Jonathan or Joe, if you have any other questions about that. Again, ours is we just don't want to get stuck without having access or ownership of any infrastructure that may be put in to service the area.
I spoke with the bond attorney earlier today, and I'm not sure, Kevin, if you and he spoke subsequent to our conversations, but there will be further legal documents as well to be considered, and one of those is called an indenture of trust. It's an agreement basically between bondholders and the city, and in particular that language about the right-of-way and residual easements to access public infrastructure across property that's turned over to bondholders will be hounded in that document in the indenture of trust. Mark said he wanted it on steroids, make it really, really clear. So that'll come in future documents. Our plan will be in a couple of weeks to be back down here at the City Council meeting to authorize a bond resolution. Once we have final terms and conditions buttoned up with bond purchasers, then we've got to get authorization from you as a City Council to actually sell the bonds. Right now we're just designating an area and assessing the property. But in order to authorize the bond issuance, we'll need all the terms and conditions from the bond purchasers, and that's still forthcoming.
Councilwoman Barch?
A couple questions on this. In Section 8, it talks about the fact that it's single family only. Why are we not having multifamily and commercial pay their fair share? And you can kind of see that a little bit also on Exhibit D, the map of the actual assessment area.
I think there is some commercial and multifamily, isn't there?
But Section 8 specifically says that it's for single family residences.
All payments on no individual assessed the cash. And if we transfer these bonds, we have to pay these bonds, not affect the individual. It's simply allocated per ERU, simpler. None of these funds will come from an ultimate homeowner or even from a builder. 100% of these funds come from us. There's a provision that does not allow us to transfer that property.
So it won't show up within their, it won't show up like an impact fee, or it won't show up anything like that. I mean, technically, you'll pass it on because you'll pass it on the cost of the land, and that's normal business, but it won't show up as part of.
No, the minute we sell it, for instance, the first phase is going to be sold Edge Homes. The minute we sell it to Edge, as part of transaction and title, 0.65 or 165% assessed bond in that area that's being paid. So none of that will pass on. So that, it was done simply at a level, because the fact it was simpler, made more sense. But none of that will homeowner will not be listed on their deed or on their tax documentation paid off.
Perfect, thank you, that's all I had.
So just council, we learned some things with our last special improvement district, and so I think the changes that you see with this relative to the past one demonstrates kind of an enhancement of where we used to be, and I think a much better process moving forward.
Ms. Barch, if I may clarify, were you looking at the resolution? Is that right? Section 8 in the resolution?
I believe, yes.
Says as further described in the assessment ordinance, any succeeding property
Yes,
owner.
sir. Yes.
Okay. And that is not specifically talking about multifamily or commercial, but that's specifically saying if Mr. Pierce sells the property to anybody else prior to that sale, or as a condition of that sale, the assessment will have to be prepaid. That's what that's referring to. If not, there's other discussions in the assessment ordinance that say they're going to waive rights to protest, they're going to waive the right to come back and argue with the city about the lien against their property, and they'll have to sign a consent, as the current property owners have done, that would waive their rights to what they call judicial foreclosure process. Because under this statute, under these documents, the city has the right to foreclose without a judge's approval. And that's really critical to spell that out in the document, because that's one of the ways that we're trying to protect the city from any problems down the road, if there ever were any. Again, we don't envision any, but we always, you know, we write the bond attorneys, not we, the bond attorneys write the documents so that in 2 or 3 pages it spells out everything you need to know about the bond transaction, and about 200 or 300 pages it spells out what happens if it goes bad. And
In
that's,
all honesty, having done bond in California, Texas, this is the most one-sided city protecting bond assessment that I have
Excellent.
ever quite frankly been involved in.
it is.
And I regularly do these, so I mean, to be frank, when I saw the first draft, I was like, this is painful. So
We-
I think
You have the benefit of coming, we've had some bad experiences. No, and we appreciate you working with us.
Now,
We've had
now
the
that
same
I read that language in Section 8, I don't think that was the intent of this, and I'd be happy to confer with the bond attorney and remove that language if it's not necessary. But I don't think that was the intent for this just to apply for single-family residential dwellings.
That would just be my, fear.
Yeah.
If something happened, it transfers to another owner, and then all of a sudden, all the multifamilies off the hook, and it just seems odd that they wouldn't have to be.
Well, again, if it transfers, they take property in lieu of any other rights. So there's no, at that point, the bond becomes extinguished. For instance, let's say we default, it's foreclosed on, the city forecloses, there's ample funds in city to do that. The city then transfers this property to the bondholder, the bond becomes extinguished as well. So, in essence, there's no passing that on to anyone else. We are the only guys here. If anyone else, the only person that could go to is to the bondholders, and gives to them as full satisfaction, so that the bond itself ceases to exist at that point. So this is not going to be transferred to any other party. This is, I think, protection in the event that we do transfer it. It's a multiplier that provides substantial protection to the city.
Yeah, and he's absolutely right, but really, I don't think that's a vital part of this resolution. And I think it is a good suggestion. Just include that in the motion, directing me to
That if it needs to be
consult with the
changed.
bond attorney, and if it's not a vital part of this resolution and it can be removed, that we just remove it.
That just be property
And have
instead of
the mayor sign it with it removed.
Can I ask a clarifying question first? Joe, just to make sure, I don't want to change the language if it's going to kind of mess with your deal. I think that you had talked previously about, selling those units as part of that, and so I don't know if this is tied directly to the residential units.
Make sure I understand what you're looking at.
If you could come up to the microphone also, Joe, that would be helpful, just so we make sure we get you clearly.
In the resolution.
It's on page 4 of the resolution, section 8,
Make sure I'm looking at the right.
right under where it has the estimated assessments.
I happen to think that Kevin's right. It's probably, if we just make it reference the ERUs and not necessarily specifically spell out single-family ERUs,
Property for a single-family residence. 3 pages assessment. Probably can be modified to just not reference single-family, but reference
ERUs.
ERUs.
And this will never, this is just a fail-safe in case we don't collect on it previously during a foreclosure. Worst case, we get a building permit, which is very unlikely to happen. I don't think it's vital to this at all.
I think it's a good idea just to consult with Ballard's Bar and find out how that needs to be modified.
You could modify it, you could actually take it off, it probably won't impact us. again, because of the fact that it's to some extent redundant. Once we transfer, it's paid off, and/or if it's foreclosed upon, that in essence, it ends the bond at that point in time. So,
Yeah. If the council is comfortable, please just make that a part of your motion, that we consult with bond counsel and modify that language as appropriate to your recommendation.
I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move that we approve the special assessment of bond series 2016 for the Mount Saratoga assessment area, consideration of adoption of those things noted on our agenda tonight, including resolution R16-55 dated today, and also the ordinance confirming the assessment list and levying the assessment against the properties in the Mount Saratoga area per ordinance 16-24 dated today, also including all staff findings and conditions, and adding the condition that staff consult with the bond attorney.
Counsel.
Bond counsel, thank you, sorry, mind blank. And change the verbiage in section 8 as necessary.
I'll second that.
Okay. I have a first from Councilwoman Barch, a second from Councilman McComber. Any further discussion?
So, can you also incorporate the changes to the ordinance that we discussed, that were
Thank you.
presented?
And also incorporating the changes made today for our discussion.
And then just clarification on the section 8, that's section 8 of the resolution.
Yes, section 8 of the resolution.
Thank you.
I have an amended first,
I have an amended I have amended second.
and I have an amended second. Any further discussion? Mark, don't. Councilman Porter?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
McComber?
Aye.
Podeska?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Approval of the minutes.
I move that we approve the minutes for September 20th, 2016, with the changes that were submitted and are posted outside.
Okay, I have a first from Councilman Porter. I have a second.
Second.
A second from Councilman Wilden. Any further discussion on the motion? Councilman Podeska?
Aye.
Barch?
Aye.
McComber? Porter?
Aye.
Wilden?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Okay, do we have need for closed session? Okay. I will entertain a motion to enter closed session at 8:30. Okay, I have, all in favor? Aye.
Okay.